everyone. I would like to thank you for joining us today in this WSD Talk. The WSD Talks are meetings organized within the project Western Sephardic Diaspora Roadmap, a project developed by the CHAM, Center for the Humanities, and the Digital Humanities Lab of the Faculdade de Ciências Sociais e Humanas da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, with the partnership of the Cátedra de Estudos Sefarditas Alberto Evangelista, the Center for Sephardic Studies, and sponsored by the Rothschild Foundation Anadiv Europe. Today, we are glad to have a WSD talk, especially dedicated to the digital work that is being developed in the Center for Jewish History in New York. The Center for Jewish History is the home of 5 partner organizations: the American Jewish Historical Society, the American Sephardi Federation, the Leo Baek Institute, the Yeshiva University Museum, and the IVU Institute for Jewish Research. In the last 22 years, the Center for Jewish History has become a leading institution in unlocking archival material for a wide audience through the latest practice in digitalization, library science, and public education. Today, 3 members of the Center for Jewish History staff will show us how the center has worked to facilitating digital scholarship. So let me introduce them. First, we have here Eric Fritzler, Senior Manager for Metadata and Discovery. Eric Fritzler has held increasingly senior roles in metadata and discovery at the center since 2008. He also served as a processing archivist for over 3 years for the American Jewish Historical Society, or one of the center's partners. Since 2017, he has worked as a senior manager for metadata and discovery, heading a department that manages the center library, archive, and museum systems that control, describe, preserve, and provide access to all of the physical and digital holdings of the 5 partner institutions. We have also Sarah Hopley, Senior Manager for Collection Service. Sarah Hopley joined the center in 2017, overseeing archivists, observators, digital photographers, and exhibit staff and their projects across 4 departments. Hopley manages the center's current Council on Library and Information Resources, digitalization grant in collaboration with the Museum of Chinese in America. Previously, she was the director of special collections and exhibits at Murray State University in Kentucky, and she also managed an Institute of Museum and Library Service, statewide preservation grant for the Wisconsin Historical Society. Lauren Gilbert is Senior Manager for Public Services. Lauren Gilbert joined the center in 2019 on the heels of 18 years in public and academic libraries in reference outreach and public programming. In her current role, she oversees public services that provide access to the partner collections for scholars, students, genealogists, educators, and the general public in the Center Lillian Goldman Reading Room and Ekman and Thief Family Genealogy Institute. Prior to the center, she served as the head of community service for 8 years at the CHAM Public Library on Long Island. So thank you all for this evening here with us, and I will give the floor to Eric. So Eric, please.
Hi. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening for you. We're really excited to be able to speak to you and to sort of introduce the center and talk through some of the different ways that the center helps facilitate digital scholarship. So I've got an exciting PowerPoint to help keep me on course, so I don't get distracted. As was mentioned in the introduction, the Center for Jewish History, it's the umbrella organization. It's the building, it's the spirit, the experiment, the I don't know, the vision of bringing together five different partners here at the center, and sort of helping centralize and helping focus on and helping enhance their missions by having all of us come together with sort of the idea that all of us running our own individual systems, our individual reading rooms, or individual sort of reference staff and everything else is, I don't know, it's going to be less efficient. It's going to be less productive in one way or another. So all of us under one roof, working together, collaborating, and sort of centralizing has been sort of the dream and the vision of the center. We're relatively new or young as far as organizations go. We were founded in 2000. A lot of our different partners that are here at the center were somewhere here, either in New England or were somewhere here actually in New York City. And so bringing them under one roof ended up helpful in sort of consolidating all of their holdings, or at least a good portion of their holdings, in one central location. As was mentioned in the introduction, millions and millions of documents, miles of linear feet of archival material, nearly 500,000 books that are both rare, or they'll be subject related, or based on scholarship in one way or another. In addition to that, also things like artwork, ceremonial objects, a variety of recordings, oral histories, photographs, any number of things. If you can imagine something strange and unusual, we probably have it somewhere in the building, including, I don't know, interesting things like irradiated, or at least it was irradiated at the time, like melted glass from some sort of a nuclear experiment in New Mexico in, I don't know, in like the 40s or something like that. But so a wide variety of objects and interesting sorts of things. And then moreover, the center, together with our partners, offers all sorts of programming, fellowships, symposiums, a variety of exhibitions, conferences, lectures, all sorts of different sort of programming. The senior managers, all of us on the call, all of us that will end up talking today, often end up helping coordinate the different services that we provide here to our partner institutions and to researchers that visit the center, either online or in our reading room. While we've done a variety of different sort of small, let's say like digital scholarship projects, digital humanities projects, a lot of what we're focused on is really sort of providing services and sort of sort of helping others, or providing like a launching pad or a platform or resources in terms of digitized material for others to do research, for others to understand more about Jewish history. So in a lot of respects, the center is something like an incubator or a facilitator, or something to that effect, that the center, in a lot of respects, if we're providing our services well, or is really allowing for others to do research, others to find things out, genealogically speaking, or do any sorts of research. To those sort of centralized services, two of the most important, two of the more significant pieces on here that I think really helps mesh the center together and all of our partners together is the fact that we've got a shared reading room where it won't really matter which partner's materials they are or pertain to, whether it's books or archival material or whatever else. It can be viewed in our reading room, the Lillian Goldman reading room. And in addition to that shared reading room and shared space for research, we also have shared proprietary library systems and different tools that all of our partners use in one capacity and another, and all that we administrate, that we end up administrating, overseeing, and making sure that they function well, so that our partners can describe their holdings and describe their materials in those systems, so that they can be discovered, they can be used, they can be found, and all of that. The idea, I think, in a lot of respects about really where the center succeeds and where we've really flourished in the last 22 years is that by sort of supervising and administering sort of a shared system and set of library systems and different things like that, and many other tasks on behalf of our partners, that's allowed them to be able to pursue other goals, other goods, whether that other opportunities than sort of providing these basic services that help the building run and help each of the partners flourish. And so that they can focus on things like processing or providing access to their collections in a variety of different ways. So when we consider the idea of the center sort of providing these services and sort of bringing all of our partners together, one of the things that we can see is sort of that that's freed up their ability to work on a variety of digital projects and a variety of digital initiatives. A lot of digitization with our different partners really began before they ever moved into the center or became a part of the center, but all of it really started to take off and really started to flourish and really increase once we were all together and once we could pool resources and figure a different strategy out for sort of working together. But the center itself has had a digital lab and the capacity for digital projects since maybe 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. And we've slowly grown more and more and more, incorporating a variety of different projects and a variety of different focuses into our digital asset management system and different sort of discovery tools. In addition to that, as part of sort of the infrastructure that we have at the center, we've got a stable, trustworthy sort of repository. It's regularly backed up. It's the security risks, so the different files inside of the system, whether we're talking about recordings or image files or whatever, what have you. The system itself views different sort of security risks to sort of identify when file formats are becoming obsolete, or when there is some way in which those files aren't supported anymore, and sort of the larger sort of digital world. And in addition to that, as part of our digital repository, a fixity is often checked. So we're ensuring that the files inside of our repository are unchanged, that they're not corrupting in any way, and that they're the same sort of files that were put into the system. One of the other sort of benefits that we've seen at the center is that since both the center and our partners act independently of one another, we've enjoyed the benefit of there being sort of concurrent projects happening at once. There'll be digitization projects, whether that's different grant funding or something from a donor or some sort of collaboration in relation to selecting and digitizing and making something available. A lot of this will happen concurrently. So the center will work on finding funding opportunities to help digitize and provide access to the different stuff that the different materials, the different holdings that our partners identify as a priority, but they'll also be doing the same thing with different sort of concurrent projects. And we'll usually, in most cases, help them with both the projects that we're working on getting funded, in addition to the projects that they might be working on independently. And that's sort of having both of us work sort of side by side, I think has really helped our digital repository flourish. And then finally, one of the other things that I think we can really use to sort of account for the significant increase in digital assets and digital holdings being available through the center is just that we've all, I see a trend in the larger community, but really also at the center too. I've seen like a transition or a shift from doing sort of like highlighted or digitized sort of treasures or items to digitization of full collections, digitization of instead of like one photograph, like the example I've got on the screen for ice cream. One photograph we'll focus on, and we'll find a way, or we'll work through digitizing a whole folder of those photographs, or a whole collection of those photographs, or something else. So we've just worked on a greater scale and a greater scope than we'd ever initially envisioned when we started digitization, started with our labs and everything else at the center. At this current point, I just took this picture, I think last night, and I have to regularly sort of update it, but we're currently within our digital repository, we have 112, almost 113 terabytes of digital material from our different partners here at the center. That ends up being about 8.5 million files that are preserved. And those files, just to help wrap our head around what those files are, is it's a variety of books, photographs, archival folders, and a variety of just recordings, any number of different things, and almost 135,000 books, digitized whatevers, digitized different sort of holdings within our repository. It's important to sort of step back and think about how a lot of this is possible. And to that end, I'm going to transfer over to our senior manager for collection services, Sarah. And I'll stop sharing my screen, and she can talk a little bit about how some of that comes to happen.
Cool. Thank you, Eric.
Sure.
All right, there we go. So as Eric mentioned, I'm the senior manager for collection services, and that's within archive and library services at the center. There are really kind of three arms or branches within archive and library services, and collection services is one of them. Within collection services, there are 4 departments that I oversee, and all 4 departments offer services to our in-house partners to help make their collections accessible, whatever that means to them, whether that, and increasingly, especially over the last couple of years, that has really meant creating digital content or helping them create digital content to then get into our digital asset management system, which is managed by Eric's department. So what we consider the life cycle of document preservation. So we'll work to stabilize items, especially when things are coming in from houses or basements or attics that'll be gross and moldy or broken, and our preservation department helps to stabilize those so that the material can still be handled by researchers and by archivists that are processing the material. We also have an archival processing department. They speak 5 different languages between the 3 of them, which is fantastic. So we can process collections from all over the world. They're really putting things in order, creating those finding aids so that researchers and anyone who's interested can find that material. Digitization speaks for itself. We have a lab that is putting out over 100,000 images a year to be ingested into our digital asset management system. Those numbers keep growing every single year because there are so many projects that are coming to us. And then finally, the newest member of collection services and also the newest member of creating digital content is our exhibitions department. So they were entirely on-site based. With the pandemic. We've seen that shift, and there's been a lot more digital content creation from them. The majority of the work we do, all of the work we do is for our partners, especially now the majority of that is grant funded. So we do that one of two ways. One, the center has our own grant writer. She's very familiar with the grant cycles. She'll see a grant and be like, oh, I know Leo Baeck Institute has a collection that's a priority for them that fits within this grant. Let's go talk to them, see if this is something we can collaborate on. Another way is that the partners come to us and say, hey, I want to digitize this whole collection. Can you help us with that? This is the grant. This is the time frame. Can we do this? And so I'm just going to briefly go over a few of our current projects, some of which are available now, some of which will be available next year. The first one we're going to, there we go. Okay, so this one is a grant that we've been working on since 2018. It's been pushed back quite a bit with COVID. It is a collaboration with an in-house partner, the American Jewish Historical Society, as well as an external partner here in the city, the Museum of Chinese in America, which you may have heard. They had a fire in their archival holding space in January of 2020. Luckily, the fire did not start in their space, but there was significant water and smoke damage. Luckily, a lot of that's been saved, but the center is working with both institutions to digitize a total of 4 collections, 2 from American Jewish Historical Society, 2 from the Museum of Chinese in America, with the idea that these 4 collections will highlight the connection between the Jewish and Chinese immigrant and refugee experience in Lower Manhattan in the early to mid 20th century. And so each collection we're digitizing the collections in entirety. And the American Jewish Historical Collections will go into our digital asset management system. MOCAs will go into theirs. They use Past Perfect. And then we will have a project page where we'll link to each of the collections. We'll be doing some programming around this work. And we will be posting that, as well as a white paper discussing all of the fun challenges that come with a digitization project in the middle of a global pandemic. I just want to briefly speak about these 2 images because I really love them. The first one, the eagle that was created by detainees from a ship that crashed on the shores of New York in 1993. It was called the Golden Venture, and it was full of Chinese asylum seekers. The government decided to put them all in jail while they went through their process, which was something new. And so the detainees created these sculptures using paper and paste in jail, and then gave it to their lawyers so that the lawyers could then sell it to help cover their own lawyer fees. And then the image in the bottom right, which I know is a little hard to see, is from a collection held by the American Jewish Historical Society called the United Service for New Americans. And their work was primarily in the 40s, working to resettle displaced persons coming over, Jewish refugees coming over from Europe post-World War II. And this collection I find extremely interesting because it shows all of the stipulations that cities had in order to take Jewish refugees in the 40s. So this specific one says, if you're sending a couple, they had 1 unit in-house. This is a small town in Idaho. They had 1 unit. They'd be willing to take a couple, but they would only accept them if the man was a tailor and the woman either had to be a seamstress or a domestic worker. That's it. That's all they would take. So there's really a lot of overlap between their experiences, even into the 20th century, between these 2 groups. And so this grant will be highlighting that, and all of that will be up in June of 2023. This is another grant we're actively working on. Eric mentioned that we have a lot of projects running at the same time. We currently have 5 grants actively running through all 4 departments in collection services. This is another one. It's a digitization project, but it's one that we don't see often, where it's starting in our preservation department. So this group, People's Relief Committee for Jewish War Sufferers, collected all of their correspondence from 1915 to about 1925. And most of the correspondence, most of it's in Yiddish, some is in English, but it's people all across America sending in money to help Jewish citizens in Europe, especially in Ukraine and Russia. And someone at some point decided to take this paper, which as you can see is old and brittle, and nailed it together and then glued it together. And so there's a lot of research interest in this collection, and it hasn't been accessible because you look at it and it just starts to crumble and fall apart. A lot of the text is hard to read because there are nails all through the paper. It's very bound, it's tightly bound, so you can't really see everything. So our conservation department has been prepping all of these books for digitization. So they're just binding it, literally using pliers to pull out nails, removing the glue, and then releasing the pages from the text block, stabilizing them, repairing tears through text, and then giving those to the digitization department to capture, and then again, working with Eric's department to ingest it into our DAM system so that they'll be accessible. This is a project that's currently going. They'll be all online and available also by June of 2023. It's going to be a big month for us next June. Something that is a little newer for us, and by little newer, I mean more than 5-7 years old, is web archiving. I really like to talk about web archiving because I think when people think about archives and the most precious things we need to save, they think about paper and books and paintings. And while that is all very true, those items are much more stable than digital objects, especially things like websites. The average website lives for less than 3 years, and that's not even including the changing content on a website. So if any of you are familiar with the Wayback Machine through Internet Archive, there is a paid service for that called Archivate, where institutions, mostly it's institutions, a lot of colleges use it, where you can pay to curate your own web collection. And so that's something that we've been doing for a few years. We really started to do it to collect our own institutional history as well as the digital footprints of our partner organizations. It then has kind of grown since then. We have had one of our partners, American Jewish Historical Society, has taken a few collections of institutions that were closing that wanted to capture their digital presence at the time of closure. So we've done that. We've also done some collecting around some major events, an anti-Semitism march in March 2020, and then also there was a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 2018. The attacker cited HIAS, the organization HIAS, as one of his reasons for the attack. And American Jewish Historical Society and YIVO, two of our partners, hold the institutional records for HIAS. So we felt that that was a really good fit for collections, for physical collections we have. So we worked on digital web archiving this. The neat thing about web archiving, I'm going to show you quickly what it looks like, is that it will only collect the page at the moment it's doing the crawl. So you can't go back and collect a web page from yesterday if content has changed. You can't collect something from 5 years ago. So you have to be aware of that as you're working through things. So we do crawls of all of our sites 4 times a year. And so just if you've never worked with web archiving or Internet Archive Wayback Machine, I like this because it'll show you, so it'll show you the URL. I'm just looking at our programs page for the center. It shows you that we've captured it 88 times between September 2016 and June of 2022, which is the last time we've done a crawl. And if you can click on whatever year you want to see, go to 2016, and then any date that has a blue circle on it, that means that's a date that that website's been crawled, and you can look at that page. So you can see on September 15th, 2016, it was crawled twice within an hour. My guess is that there was an error in the first crawl, and so it recrawled it. But you just click on it and it'll show you exactly the hour and the minute and the second that it was captured. That's less important for the web capturing we're doing, but if you're looking at like especially government websites, maybe when there's a change in leadership and materials being removed from websites or added to websites, it's nice to have that timestamp because then you can see when things came or left. And there you go. This is what our program page looked like in 2016, which is great because it looks very similar still today. So just a nice way, another resource to work with digital objects, which are everywhere. And then quickly, the final thing and our newest thing that we've really been working on is digital exhibitions. We had done a couple through Google Arts and Culture before I started. It's like 2015, Eric-ish? Sure, 2015. But it wasn't really anything we had really thought about. And as part of our collaboration with the Museum of Chinese in America on that grant, come to find out that they have a collection of a Jewish American photographer who actually worked for a Chinese newspaper in Chinatown in Manhattan. His name is Emil Bosian, and they really wanted to do an exhibit on it, but they didn't really have the space and the timing wasn't quite working out. So they contacted us and said, hey, I know we're doing this other project. Would you be interested in doing this? And it worked out perfectly. Lauren co-curated this with their curator. And we were all set to open, and then COVID hits. And so we weren't able to actually open the physical exhibit. And as we realized that the center was still going to be closed for a while and what to do, and we put all this work and everyone was really excited about this exhibit, we decided, or Lauren decided with our exhibition manager and our art director, to put it online. And so this is really the center's first exhibit that we've done ourselves online. So this is all of his name is Emil Bosian. It's all of his imagery. And it's just another way to interact with collections. They were able to use some material on the digital exhibition that they didn't use in the physical exhibition, which I think is really fun. And just briefly, I want to show you my favorite part of the exhibit. There's Emil in his fun glasses and his camera. Lauren did then and now. So they realized going through Emil's photos that they had all of these pictures of Chinatown buildings from the late 70s and early 80s. So our art director, who's also a photographer, went and took pictures of the exact same buildings in early 2020, right before COVID hit New York, which I think is extra special with this because, as you may know, Chinatown and Manhattan got hit really hard in COVID. A lot of businesses closed. They're still working on getting people back to that area. So I think it's just, not only do you get to see what it looked like in 1978, you get to see 2020. And there's even one where it was still the exact same place. So first photo is 1976, second photo 2020, still the same tea parlor, which I just think is really fun. So those are just a few of the projects we're working on in collection services to help make all of the partners' materials more accessible. And now I'll give it back to Eric.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah. There we go. Building off of the work that Sarah's teams do, it's sort of important to dwell on both the description and the systems that sort of provide or deliver that description to help guide people into the reading room or help people find what they might online. We've got sort of a suite of different library systems. Most of these we could just quickly go through, but these would be comparable to, I think, a lot of different systems that most universities would have, or a lot of larger cultural institutions might have. But we've got an integrated library system, and an archive space instance. Our digital asset management system is it's called Rosetta, and that system was part of what I took that screen capture demonstrating the size of our digital repository now. And then one of the other things that we have that sort of helps bring all of these different systems together in a helpful sort of way and helps normalize a variety of things is we have something called a discovery layer, and that in a lot of ways just works like a catalog, or just sort of an online public catalog, but at the same time it brings all the different data sources together and sort of normalizes them so that you can look at archival collections side by side with books, and side by side anything, different photographs, different I don't know, different artworks, if that was what the research interest pertained to, and they would all sort of be side by side in a list. One of the other things that we've really benefited from at the center in a variety of different ways is that all of our description really ends up in two different forms. And this pertains to both physical and in digital holdings for our partners, but it's either in the MARC schema, the MARC format, or it's in encoded archival description format in our system. But really having those two different, really just having those two different sort of schemas, those two different metadata standards to work with, it makes it helps sort of it helps combining those different things and to help be able to look at those different sort of holdings sort of side by side, and it helps just sort of standardize what people might find in our different systems, even if it comes from archival description versus sort of bibliographic description. And then just within our systems, within our viewer, in our digital asset management system, it's demonstrated in a more simplified metadata schema, with the idea that sort of less is more. You want to know things like the year something was created, the collection something is from, or whatever else. But beyond sort of like beyond those systems, beyond beyond our systems, there's also the question too of like, if somebody doesn't know about the center, if somebody isn't familiar with all of the holdings that our partners have, something that we've often considered as just how we can get outside of those systems and put our metadata, put our description in a variety of different spots so that we can lead researchers, lead those interested back to our systems and back to our reading room and a variety of different things like that. This image here, I think we were onboarding a new metadata intern, and we ended up just we're in an old classroom, and we had a marker board, so we just plotted out a lot of the different associations in the landscape of our different systems, how they interrelate, how they interoperate, and the relations between the two, and just for some of that richness of how they all relate together. But in terms of driving or just helping people discover, helping people find out about all the different wonderful stuff here, whether it's the photographs of ice cream trucks or whatever else, we'll work with a variety of different platforms outside of our systems, such as things like WorldCat or Archive Grid or DPLA or Europeana, just to help people find what we have here and to help sort of assist them with coming to understand, just the richness and the interrelationship between all of our different partners' collections here. But that's really been more and more important as time goes on, pushing our metadata out, pushing our description out to a variety of different venues and platforms and portals, so that people can find out and be redirected back to the material that we have here at the center. But the idea is that once researchers, once a genealogist, once somebody curious about the center, about Jewish history or whatever else finds that stuff, they'll be guided either back to our public catalog or guided back to making a reservation in our reading room to look at stuff that is not yet digitized, or in a lot of cases too, just to look at a variety of things that are digitized but maybe can't be made publicly available on the internet in one way or another. And that's where I'd like to introduce Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen quickly. Okay, so as Eric mentioned, I am Lauren Gilbert, Senior Manager for Public Services here at the Center. And so the public services arm of Archive and Library Services, basically, we are the ones who try to connect you, the researchers, with the collections that belong to all 5 of our partners. That could be connecting you online with digitized content or in person in the reading room, which you can see here. I know all of you are in Portugal, or at least in Europe. I hope you'll have a chance at some point in your careers to come here to the center, but this is what our reading room looks like. And we try to make it a real seamless experience for the researcher, because from your perspective, it doesn't really matter which of our partners owns the collection, because you're going to see it all in one place and you're going to find it through the shared library systems that Eric was telling you about. We are now currently, since COVID, on an appointment only model in the reading room, but we are still open to all. Appointments are made online, and I'll talk a little. I'll mainly be focusing on digitization and digital content. We also have a digitization on demand service for researchers, but I will show you that in a little while. I also oversee the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute, which is the first stop for most genealogy researchers here at the center. It's also the first stop for anyone coming into our division, because you enter through the Genealogy Institute to the reading room. But here is where genealogy researchers access paid databases, genealogy reference books, and journals, but most importantly, the expertise of our 2 full-time genealogy specialist librarians. And also, there are general historical researchers not doing genealogy who find that they really benefit from this expertise as well, because if you're researching an individual from history who was not particularly noteworthy, and there's not a lot of information, available easily found in collections, sometimes the assistance of someone who understands genealogy is very beneficial in looking through vital records and finding information about towns and communities. So we often direct non-genealogy researchers to our genealogy librarians as well. I'm going to switch out and show you, switch over to our website so I can talk about how you'll find some of the content, particularly the digitized content. But basically from our website, which is cjh.org, from the menu, the most important part from this perspective is the research tab here, which will link you to our catalog, information about the reading room and the Genealogy Institute page, where our archive space page, which collects all of our online finding aids, which you can search there. So, and Eric was talking about this a little bit as well. I always recommend researchers start with the general catalog search, because that searches library material, archival material, museum materials. And unless you specifically really know what you're looking for, it's best to start with the more general, and the catalog record will always link you to a relevant online finding aid where one exists. Also briefly, these research guides are, these are LibGuides. They're sort of curated collections that go, they're sort of deep dives into particular topics or places or big complicated collections. So it's a way to, that we've created these guides to help researchers just to learn more about a particular topic. So those can be very helpful as well as our paid and free databases that we offer. The paid database is available only on site, unfortunately, and information about fellowships. As Eric said, rather than like the creators of digital humanities projects, basically here at the center, and particularly in the public services department, we're here to connect the researchers with the materials to help you with your projects. But there have been some occasions where center staff was instrumental in sort of spearheading digital humanities projects, and I'll briefly talk about a couple of those. One of them came through the Genealogy Institute, and it was sort of the creation of one of our genealogy librarians, our senior genealogy librarian, Moria Amit, who's actually right here in this picture. And the project is called the New York City Synagogue Map. Basically, the point of this was to recreate the geography of Jewish life in New York City in the early decades of the 20th century. So what they did was find information about, largely from print sources, about all of the existing synagogues at that time. And this is a geotagging project. It's digital mapping. And it currently only covers Manhattan because the plan is to expand to all 5 of the boroughs of New York City, but it's quite time consuming because all of this information has to be entered. And this is the Lower East Side, which is why there are so many synagogues, practically one on every corner. And each one of these stars represents a synagogue. And you can click into it and see all the information about the synagogue, as well as when it started, when it was organized, and the town that it came from, which is very relevant to genealogy researchers because most of these synagogues were formed by immigrants who came from the same towns in Europe. They would come over here and create, they're called Landsmannschaften, they're mutual aid societies for immigrants who immigrated from the same towns in Europe. They would find each other here and create houses of worship, as well as provide loans or other types of assistance, assistance with burial. So basically, if a researcher knows the town that their family came from and generally what neighborhood they came from, they can find on this map where their ancestors likely worshipped. And there's a plan as well to add photos wherever possible to these records. And those photos would be found either in books or in Yibo's photo collections. So again, this is an ongoing project that's been done by our librarians as well as several volunteers, genealogy volunteers. And it's, searchable by any portion of the record, including the town of origin of the founders of the synagogue. And of course, you can scroll in or out of the map. One thing, unfortunately, there used to be a 1911 map layer on this map that we found through the New York Public Library. It was a digital composite of a 1911 atlas from the New York Public Library, but that we can no longer use it because it doesn't support HTTPS protocol, so it's no longer compatible with our website. So I'm just mentioning this as sometimes some of the caveats with these digital projects. Hopefully at some point they will upgrade their maps and the map division at New York Public, and then we can bring it back into our site because it's very helpful to actually see the synagogues on a street map of that day because street names change, and sometimes even the grid of the map, streets move around. So that is one feature that currently is not available on the map. But when we created this map, we thought it would be, interesting to genealogists and historians, but we didn't know how other people would use it. Like we've been contacted last year by Pavel Katz at Jewish Heritage Network about using this data for their JSTORY project for walking tours that would be available through a free app used by tourists. We also found out about this this Twitter page, which was created by Amy Shreve, who's a college student in Texas. Interestingly, she's not Jewish and has never been to New York City, but she found our synagogue map page. And you can see she credits us here, and she basically using Google and Twitter APIs, she created this Twitter bot that will show the current, show the address, the name and description of the synagogue, as well as a picture of what it looks like now using Google Maps. And we didn't know this existed until we read an article about it. And this story got quite big. It was picked up by multiple Jewish news outlets. And as a result of that, so many people reached out to her, asking her to expand her project to other cities and providing data for her. And she is Now moving on to the Old West. So you can see if you go to her page currently, what she's been including now is not New York, because she's made it through all of our data, and now she's in North Dakota. And so this, I guess, was the site of a synagogue, which is now the site of a lot of grass and trees. And you'd never find that in New York because real estate is too valuable. So when she was doing the, pulling all the New York data, it was quite interesting because you would see a synagogue that had been often repurposed into a church or an apartment building or torn down and became something else. So this is just as an example of you create a project and then it gets used in all kinds of interesting ways. Something else another project that was started here several years ago, and you can see that it was several years ago because it's hosted on Flickr, and which is not too commonly used today, but this was another digital humanities project that was spearheaded here at the center by center staff. There's a collection at the American Jewish Historical Society, which is the papers of Colonel Seymour Pomeranz, who was one of the monument's men, and he was the first director of the Offenbach Archival Depot after the war, which was the collection site for books that were looted by the Nazis. And that collection includes binders full of photographs of the stamps, the ex libris and library markings in the books, which really creates sort of an exhaustive chronicle of Nazi book looting, because you can see where all of these items came from. So the idea was that the staff was creating a spreadsheet with information about all the stamps and also uploading all the photographs to this Flickr page. And they also, I can't get to, this is blocked by, move that away. Okay, and they also created a mapping page, which also lives on Flickr, basically showing the movement of the books throughout Europe. But because, as I mentioned, and I think Eric mentioned as well, this isn't creating, we provide access to our collections, but doing these kind of digital humanities projects isn't our primary focus. So some of these projects can be sort of abandoned or neglected over time, as happened to this one. In fact, this Flickr map used to have its own dedicated URL, which I tried and is no longer working. So I have one of my staff right now is actually at Rare Book School at the University of Virginia doing a course in a 1-week course in provenance research. And she's thinking maybe she'll sort of revive this project, which I think would involve migrating it to another site, but it's certainly an interesting project and worth reviving. So there's a project I'm going to mention that you may be familiar with, which it's hosted now at Columbia University, but it came out of conversations that happened here at the center. Actually, if you look at the About page, she talks about, they talk about that it was growing out of discussions held at a scholars working group and the Jewish book that met here at the center from 2009 to 2013. So this is another way that we can help these projects, is creating the space for the scholars to get together. We have scholars working groups, we have fellows here who have weekly meetings together. So it's as sort of incubating these ideas and these projects, who then go on to live, projects that go on to live elsewhere. But just briefly, it's somewhat similar to the Offenbach Depot project in that it's tracing the movement of books, Jewish books, through space and time for the first several centuries of print. And it's searchable by person, by the place, or of course by the title of the book. And they give some examples just to show particular titles and following them through, through time and space. So it's a really interesting project. And you can see, if you look at the list of contributors, that includes some of our partners here, the Leo Baeck Institute and the YIVO Institute. But again, this is an ongoing project, and I know they're continually adding to their database. And one of the prime movers of this project is Michelle Margolis, who's a librarian at Columbia, but she's also on the academic advisory board here at the center. And I just recently got back from a conference of the Association of Jewish Libraries, which as of this conference, is the new president of the association. And she presented there about this new web portal, which also not housed here at the center, but I just wanted to make sure that you're all aware of this DH Jewish website. It's designed as a single access point for news, events, and projects at the intersection of Jewish studies and digital humanities. And it includes links to multiple projects, a lot of digital humanities projects, as well as straight digitization projects, including the Vilna project here at YIVO. And there's also a community that you can join, which I recommend that you do if you haven't. So this is a new project, and that they're very actively looking for contributors and partners. And before I get back to the center, just along the same lines, at this conference, I learned about this upcoming title, Jewish Studies in the Digital Age, coming out from De Gruyter in just a couple of months. And Michelle, who's the librarian on our advisory board, is also an editor of that. Okay, so to get back more to what specifically we at the center can offer you, I would like to show you briefly, when you're searching the collection, how to limit to digital items, so that you can, since you're all obviously not local, how you can access.
Okay, I'll call you at around 8.
How you can access collections remotely. So I'll do a search. I know Carlo was working on Aaron Lopez, so I'm going to put that one in. And you'll see when you do a search, you might, depending on the topic, there could be hundreds of results. In this case, there's 29. But again, just to show you that when you do a search, you're searching across collections, and there are 3 of our partners that hold material related to these search terms, and it includes all types of materials, books, visual materials, and archival materials. And these are all ways to limit your search. But for our purposes, an important way to limit your search is this available online option here. And then when you do that, you'll notice that all your results have this option here, online access, and you could link it right from this page, or you could click into the full catalog record to see what it is pertaining to, and then you can go right into the digital object, which in this case is a museum object. And that is true for all of these items. In some cases, these are single digitized folders of larger collections, which are overall not digitized, but there are pieces of them that are digitized, which is why they came up in this search. And I'll just show you what one of those folders can look like. I mean, it can range in length from a single page to, there could be, 50 pages in a folder. But in this case, when you look at digitized archival folders, you can scroll through the pages, you can manipulate them, blow them up, scroll in or out. And also very helpful for you is that you can download them in PDF format. And I just want to show you, I'm going to take off this filter to show you how to look at one of our full finding aids. So this is the catalog record for a full archival collection. All of this information is pulled from the finding aid. But if you're working with large archival collections, you're going to want to see a complete finding aid. And our finding aids are housed at this site, archives.cjh.org. And this is where you can pretty much, on the right here, collection organization, drill down into the series and the sub-series and the contents of the individual folders when possible. And I always recommend, when you're working with archival collections, to You can download the this finding as a PDF, which you can see it all in one place. It's keyword searchable, and you can see where specifically where the digitized content lives. And I, just as an example, because it sometimes takes a couple of seconds to format the PDF. I did that before we started, but this is the full finding aid, lists of related collections that you could click into, information about provenance, and all of the description, in this case, down to the folder level. But for your purposes, a very helpful option is that sometimes in a large collection, it's not digitized, as I said, but there are pieces that are, most likely because we had a researcher who requested digitization on demand, and then we ingested that bit of digitized material into our system. So now it's available for everybody. And it may be very spotty, it may be just small bits of a collection, but you'd be able to see it here and then click into it right from within in the finding aid. I want to show you briefly, for those of you who might at some point be wanting to request digitization for undigitized collections, how you would do that. You would, from our catalog page, there's an option to visit your library services account. So in order to either make an appointment to come see us in person, or more likely, in your case, I guess, to request digitization, you need an account with us. And this is all done online. There's a first-time users option where you would create your account. I'm going to log on to my account just because it's pre-existing, and I can show you how you would do this. There's a new request. And again, you don't have to remember all of this. We are available to assist. We have an inquiries email where we're frequently assisting researchers with placing their requests or making appointments. People call the reading room. But just to show you that there's an option at this point for coming in person, a request for the reading room, or a photo duplication request. And at that point, you can manually enter what you're looking for, or much easier from your perspective, there's an option to request the item, which will then import it into a search. And because I'm already logged into this library system, it's going to automatically import this collection into the search. It's going to default to a reading room request, and you can switch to photo duplication. And for a large archival collection, I mean, if it was a book, you might be requesting certain page numbers for an archival collection. You pretty much need to know like what boxes and folders, and you would get that information from the finding aid when it's available. Sometimes the information is not detailed enough, so the librarians will often look through a collection for you and help you figure out what portions of it that you need for your digitization project. And by submitting this request, you're not tied into anything. You'll always receive a cost estimate for any project before we go ahead and do anything. So basically, you're just saying you're interested in digitization, and we would get back to you with an estimate, and you could decide from there. So we have been doing this digitization on demand for several years, but it actually exploded during COVID, not surprisingly, because we were closed for about 1.5 years. So we really sort of ramped up this service to assist researchers everywhere around the world. We have an active program of fellows who come here to work at the center, including Carla, who was one of them. But during COVID, we had some remote only fellows who we were able to assist entirely by digitizing the information that they were interested in and providing it. There was one fellow an entirely remote fellow who was at Oxford, and we digitized a bunch of albums created by a German department store. And as a result of that, she did all of her research on the topic remotely, and then she provided a public program also completely remotely. So there's a lot we can do for you for those of you who can't come to us in person, and often that starts with digitization. So that's pretty much it from my end, but I'm happy to take any questions about any of that. Let me stop my screen share. So I think, Eric, were you wrapping up?
Yeah, yep, I'll please, there we go. I really wanted to thank everyone for joining us and letting us talk to you a little bit more about the digitization and all the different ways that we can help facilitate research at the center. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk and all of that. We'd like to thank both our hosts for this, in addition to both our colleagues at the center and at the partner organizations as well. We've got plenty of time for any sort of questions you might like, but here we are, and thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you for this interesting presentation. I think that it was very helpful to know how the center is working to make these materials, these precious materials of the partner institutions, more available for the researchers, which is particularly important for works about American Jewish communities, but not only here in Europe. So it's very helpful. I know that because before have my fellowship in Iorque, I have already used your materials that are available in digital format in your website, and it has been quite helpful. Now I would like to open the discussion, and if some of you have questions, please let me know with the hand up. I will do just one question to start, because I know that the Center for Jewish History have a lot of materials about the early times of the American Jewish communities before the revolution, in particular the collection of the American Jewish Historical Society. And some materials are digitalized, that are available in digital format, but others not. I don't know. I would like to know what are the criteria that you use to digitalize the materials. It's a chronological criteria, the value, or maybe some materials that are more searchable by the researchers. So if you could talk a little about it.
Sarah, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I was like, I can cover that one. So it really depends. There are two things. One, the grants, that a lot of our work is done through grants. And so it's grants that will support that kind of work. So does it fall within the grants guidelines that we can do? I think the other one, and maybe even more so than the grants, is research interest. And so how accessible is the material already? Is it in pretty good condition? Can it be handled? Is it on microfilm that is pretty good condition that can be utilized? Is there anything that's held at other institutions that maybe they digitized it there? Is it truly unique to just being held at the center? And so all of that kind of comes into it too when we're talking about projects and what comes next. And so if there's something that you're interested in that's not digitized, could not hurt to let that institution know that that's something you're interested in, so it's on their radar, because really they only know based on what researchers tell them. So if no one says, hey, I really would love if this was digitized so I don't have to fly to New York to look at it, that would be really helpful, then that helps put that in their minds so we can think about that with next grant applications.
Yeah, and a lot of course, the digitization on demand projects are all researcher driven. And the benefit is that it will digitize the whatever portion of the collection the researcher is interested in, but again, then it's digitized for everybody. So it has ongoing benefits to other researchers.
When I announced this talk with you, I have some people in our social media that were doing some questions about the records of the Charity Israel congregation. I know that the center, the American Jewish Historical Society, have some materials that inclusively some of them are available online, but the great part of the records are still in the congregation. Do you have some kind of dialogue with the congregation to encourage them to digitalize this material, or maybe just if you could give us some information about it? I think that there is people that are very interested to know how to access to this information, that it's not easy to access at the moment.
Well, it's really the American Jewish Historical Society, which is the repository for that collection. And they're the ones who have the connections with the synagogue. I don't know if when you were here, I think you met Melanie Myers, who was now the deputy director, also the director of collections. So for specific questions like that, we would always direct the researcher to the person at the appropriate partner organization who would the information.
Okay. Also, it's this kind of work in a network with this networking with other holding institutions that you have. For example, I was looking to the question that David Silvera put in the chat about your relation with the American Jewish Archives. And indeed, the American Jewish Archives have copies of some materials that are in the Center for Jewish History. And I don't know if you have plans to give more information about this kind of existence of copies of other materials that are in other institutions, that not in the Center for Jewish History, but or other kind of collaboration between different holding institutions to put these materials more available for the public. And I think that this is it's quite interesting, this kind of because, for example, for the Western Sephardic diaspora, the materials are very scattered in several archives, and it will be interesting to see if there was some kind of maybe you in the center also guide the researchers for these questions and to other institutions that have this kind of materials. I imagine that in particular in the genealogical institute, it's you have a lot of queries about it.
Yeah, I mean, Eric was talking about the way we get our materials into other search portals like, WorldCat and Archive Grid. So, I mean, it's always best to start if you're not sure which organization holds the type of materials you're interested in. Always better to start at the top, because you might find repositories that you didn't know about. But I know there are a lot of organizations, working together on various portals of Jewish history, collecting information, collecting digitized content and metadata from across multiple organizations. Yeah. Do you want to talk about any of those, Eric?
One of the things that I do know that we will be working more with YIVO, and I think to some degree LBI as well on, is their collections that directly relate to Europe for the Yerusha project. But I'm also starting to wonder, just based on what you said, Carla, if some of the American Jewish historical, some of their archival description maybe could find its way into that portal as well, or find its way into a larger platform to discover alongside other institutions that hold similar material. Any other questions or anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Well, at the risk of boring folks, Carl and I met on a couple of Zooms ago, but really I was interested in the Western idea, the notion of this applying to Western Sephardic research. I am from Jamaica, and certainly I've used your collection, so found some interesting material, but my interest as a researcher is 17th century Spanish Portuguese, and I've selected Bevis Marx records as the area of interest, particularly those that have not been the subject of texts that have been written over the years, and starting with the first 2 years of accounts books, which were scanned and published on the National Library of Israel website. So we were able to get those scans. And the interesting thing is that working with the transcriber software that Carl and those can tell you more about, I have scanned 180 pages of books, and you get searchable text. Do not have a home for this yet, nor a sponsor to pay to have it. It would actually be made available online. So if you'd be able to see the transcribed text alongside of the handwritten text, that you could decide if transcription was good or not. Transcribing handwriting from in Portuguese from 17th century is a skill I certainly have had. I've learned something of it, but there's no perfect answer in a lot of cases. So that's why I'm here to listen and maybe learn something. But if you have suggestions as to where I could find a home for this work, it would be nice to hear it. And by all means, Colin knows how to find me.
Thank you, David. One thing that it's very interesting also, it's the numerous collections that you have of private researchers and scholars who gave you the materials and the research materials. I'm remembering that I was looking for the Samuel Oppenheim papers that are in the Center for Jewish History, and there is a lot of material that it's very interesting and impulsively material that to have a lot of potential to become an interesting digital project. For example, we had made a collection of news and advertisements about Jews in New York in the 18th century. So it's quite interesting material to work, just to give here a suggestion. Also, the center have a program of fellowships. I would like to know if you are wondering to open fellowships specifically to develop digital projects with your collections. Maybe it will be a good idea, I think.
Yeah, I don't. It's separate group that does the evaluation. I don't know, maybe Lauren can speak more about that, but it's something I do think we've suggested and like mentioned as a possibility for a weighted fellowship or something like that. But I'm sorry, I'm not actually familiar with the processes. Do you know, Lauren?
Well, I would recommend looking at the fellowship page on our website where it describes all of the different fellowship opportunities. I don't believe any of them at the moment are specifically targeted to digital humanities, but that could certainly change. We've hired a new director of academic programs, a new advisor for our fellows. So I know that they're currently in discussions about how this will move forward. And certainly since the pandemic, we've seen how a lot of this work can be done remotely, and while they try to develop an in-person community of fellows, I think there will continue possibly to be a remote option. And I agree that we should probably incorporate a specifically targeted fellowship for a digital humanities project.
Nice. So I think that there is no more questions, and I'd like to thank you. If someone have further questions to put to Lauren, Sarah, or Eric, you have the email. You can also mail me, and then I will send them the questions. And thank you a lot for everyone to be in this hot evening here in Lisbon, and I suppose that in New York too.
Yeah.
And
Quite hot, so not in
yeah.
my office. Yeah.
And thank you a lot, and see you in the next WSD talk. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Mm.
Bye.